Day 2 of the NFL draft is in the books, and the Broncos will be on the clock here today for day 3 as they approach rounds 4 through 7. Who did the Broncos add with their second round pick, and who did they add in round 3 in the passing game here for this Denver Broncos offense in 2022? We talk about that, and we talk about overreaction season all in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos. Happy Saturday morning. The Denver Broncos took part in their first attendance portion of the NFL draft on day 2 with a pick in round 2 and a pick in round number 3 of all the action here. We have you covered on today's episode, Locked on Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format and also here on YouTube. If you're a Broncos fan and you're just now finding this channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button or that follow button on your favorite podcasting provider. Sayre, my friend, hey, the Broncos have 2 new players on the roster and 2 players who could make an impact immediately here in 2022. We'll talk about the round 2 pick for the Broncos at 64 and talk about a little bit more of the action, man. But, your thoughts initially for the NFL draft on day 2.
Cody, I'm pumped. I'm really excited. I know that a lot of people, they fall in love with certain prospects in the pre-draft process, and I'm that way as well. I'm sitting on Twitter clamoring for players just as much as the next Broncos fan. But, hey, I just need everybody to be reminded. Number 3, Russell Wilson, he's on the roster. So everything else it's not just cherries on top. It's like sprinkles. It's like, hey, what other additional toppings do you want here on this thing? Like, you've already got every topping that you need. What other toppings do you want? These are wants at this point. And yes, they could turn into eventual needs. And yes, roster building, it's a year-to-year thing, and you have to include next year's needs potentially in the mix. But man, the Broncos got 2 really good players who, like you said, they are going to make instant impacts in 2022. Mark those words. Barring injury, those guys are going to play. They're going to play, and maybe even in the case of one of them, start. So I think, Cody, this is a big day for the Denver Broncos, and including next year as well in the mix. George Paton maneuvering the board. It was a great night for the Denver Broncos.
Well, while the Broncos will be back on the clock here today in day 3 of the NFL draft, let's recap here day 2 of the action, which was essentially the Denver Broncos' first day of the NFL draft here. Pick number 64, the Broncos go with edge rusher Nick Bonitto out of Oklahoma. Now, he is a speed rusher. He's got a combination of size, speed, athleticism for him. He's at 6'3", 240 pounds here. Now, here's something that's interesting at Oklahoma, Sayre, and that defense that they had. He had 16 sacks in the last 2 seasons for that Sooners defense. But even more impressive, too, where's an area he can help the Broncos at significantly against the run as well. In the last 2 seasons at Oklahoma, also 26 and a half tackles for a loss behind the line of scrimmage. He'll be an impact player there. And I think that there are a lot of people in Broncos country that are trying to figure out, well, with Randy Gregory, with Bradley Chubb, those guys are expected to get the start. How is Nick Bonitto going to work his way into the rotation? I think right now, Sayre, he propels up to number 3 in the rotation easily. And obviously, with the Broncos, with some of the injury concerns with Bradley Chubb, and right now he's healthy, but Randy Gregory, supposed to be ready for the regular season. This is a good pick for the Broncos. I like this selection.
I think it's a great pick, Cody. It's a pick that, dating back to last year, if you go back to, I dug through some of my archive of tweets from last year when Von Miller was poised to go into a contract year. Nick Bonitto was one of the guys that first popped up on the radar in terms of 2020 pass rush win rate. He was one of the best in the country, if not the best, and he carried that over into 2021. Early on in the season, watching Oklahoma, there's no doubt that Nick Bonitto can play a 3-down role in the NFL, whether the Broncos ask him to rush the quarterback, whether they ask him to get in pass coverage or play the run like you mentioned. A really interesting fact about Nick Bonitto, Cody, we talk about burst off the edge. That's a key trait for pass rushers because you have to win off the ball. And who's better than that, in my opinion, and maybe yours too, better than anyone in NFL history at getting off the ball quickly? That's Von Miller, who did it for his entire career. He's doing it for his entire career. He's still doing it today. But Nick Bonitto, Cody, at the scouting combine all the way back in 2011, Von Miller had a 10-yard split of 1.62. Nick Bonitto, Cody, 10-yard split of 1.53, which just means he's almost a tenth of a second
That first
faster than
move.
Von Miller. That first burst, that initial burst, that's huge. It's absolutely huge. In addition to the production that you talked about, man, I mean, the traits are all there. He's a high RAS guy. You know, we've talked about that all draft season. He's everything the Broncos have prioritized since George Paton came aboard as general manager, and he fits a need off the edge, like you mentioned, with those question marks above him on the depth chart.
A lot of Broncos fans said the Broncos need an edge rusher. They went out and they got one. And look, he could start next year. I think a lot will be contingent upon what the Broncos decide to do with Bradley Chubb. There's a lot of pressure on Chubb now because they have yet to either pick up or announce that they're not picking up his fifth-year option and putting that pressure on him. It's going to be a big season for Bradley Chubb. But Nick Bonitto, you can expect him in the Broncos defensive rotation in Ejiro Evero's defensive scheme here in year one for the rookie out of Oklahoma. But who did the Denver Broncos select in their second pick, which came in round number 3 of the NFL draft? They entered the night last night with 3 picks. They came away with 2. What's the full story? You get that and much more coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos Draft Recap from Day 2. It's our good friends over there at Shady Rays. And Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something that you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. And Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair of glasses. They will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. So give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners of Locked On Broncos, head to shadyrays.com, use promo code Locked On to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code Locked On for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses. The Denver Broncos were supposed to be on the clock at pick number 75 of the 2022 NFL Draft, but they executed a trade back. As we get to that in today's episode, Locked On Broncos, real quick, Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Both Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we appreciate you so much. You can get this podcast, like we said, here daily on YouTube, or you can get us on your favorite audio podcasting platforms. Make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on all the action. Sayre, a lot of talk here for this Broncos football team initially yesterday after pick number 64. What is George Paton? What are they going to do next? Well, the Broncos, they became close to getting on the clock at 75. They decided to trade back with the Houston Texans and acquire additional capital. They acquired an additional 5th-round pick in this year's draft, and they just swapped spots with them. The thing that I like about this, they go on the offensive side of the ball, right? And I think everybody at first, at pick number 64, Denver was waiting. Fans were waiting. I actually had a little bit of hope, too. I was like, okay, hey, Trey McBride might be here at 64. Nope. Arizona Cardinals come in and swoop in. So, hey, there's an option off the board here for the Denver Broncos, but they go tight end. They go Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. And Sayre, there's some top notable people out there. Dane Brugler had him high on his big board. Daniel Jeremiah had him listed as tight end number 1. He is a legitimate downfield threat here for this Broncos team. And one important note here, a 17.6 career yards per reception average. If that doesn't say that this can open up the Broncos offense, I don't know what will. What were your thoughts on the Greg Dulcich pickup here for the Broncos with pick number 80?
I absolutely love this pick, Cody, for the Denver Broncos. The more you dig into it, the more you love Greg Dulcich. Again, he fits the profile in terms of athleticism traits that the Broncos look for. A high RAS score once again, not up in the 9 or close to 10, but over 8, which is very good for the relative athletic score count. Still in the green there. But, man, you mentioned it. He's a big play threat. And in addition to averaging over 17 yards per reception at UCLA over the last 2 seasons, he had 3 50-yard touchdown catches, Cody. And for a guy that's 245 pounds, that's not normal. So, I mean, this guy is a definite big play threat. You pair him up with Albert Okwuegbunam. We consistently reference the play from Alberto last year where he caught the pass from Teddy Bridgewater and then ran 60-some-odd yards down the field. The Broncos once again have an athletic duo of receivers at the tight end position with Noah Fant obviously gone to the Seattle Seahawks. Now you get a replacement for Noah Fant and somebody at UCLA. He played for Chip Kelly at UCLA, Cody.
Yep.
He played the inline tight end position and he flexed out into the slot. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that from the Broncos tight ends this year. I think that that's going to be prioritized in Nathaniel Hackett's offense. When they want to go, with the bangers up front, they'll probably put Eric Tomlinson, the veteran, out there along with maybe Andrew Beck. But man, if you got the NASCAR unit out there on offense, you put Greg Dulcich out there, you put Albert Okwuegbunam out there, what are defenses supposed to do with your other three receivers that are on the field? I just don't know. When you watch Greg Dulcich play, I think people are going to be really surprised just at this guy's open field acceleration, the way that he runs by. When he gets a full head of steam, I mean, he's an impressive athlete out there in the open field. It may not reflect in his 40-yard dash time. I mean, we're holding him to a high standard there. Alberto, a 4.5 or a 4.49 or whatever it was, and then Noah Fant was obviously very close to that. So it's definitely one of those things where, I mean, did the Broncos need somebody to come in at the tight end position and start this year? Maybe, maybe not. We're about to find out, but I think that he's a good fit nonetheless.
10 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons for the UCLA Bruins for him. But right now, the Broncos tight end room consists of Albert O. You now add Greg Dulcich to it. You have Andrew Beck as that fullback, tight end, hybrid, H-back, whatever you want to call it. Now, Eric Tomlinson as that main blocker. So if Denver ever goes 13 personnel, we could understand, okay, hey, this is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to have Alberto and Greg Dulcich in and Eric Tomlinson in. A couple of those guys will be expected to block, and then you have a receiving option there. You could do a lot of different things here, but it gives the Broncos, I think, position versatility here. And you get another receiving threat because really outside of Alberto, you don't necessarily have a legitimate tight end receiving threat. Let's say something were to happen to Alberto. Who do you have at that point? Greg Dulcich is also a great security and I'd say investment insurance policy here for this Broncos team. So I'm a big fan of the pick here. I'm excited about it. I know that Broncos fans wanted certain players at the position early at pick number 75. There's all these different options. We'll address that coming up here in just a few moments here, Sayre. But, another thing as well, he's not necessarily a refined, complete blocker. But what did George Paton mention in his pre-draft press conference? None of the tight ends in this year's draft class realistically and running backs are great blockers because of how the college football game has evolved and has changed from rather being traditional inline to being flexed out or put on the outside. It's about what these guys can do to improve. And that's exactly why coaches are hired in the NFL, is to coach these guys to get better in those departments. And certainly this is an area that Dulcich, by the way, can do that. So I don't know. I see a lot of overreaction. It's overreaction season, because the Broncos didn't choose certain players that certain fans wanted, which is understandable. I get fans get invested. They have their mindset on this would be a great pick for the Broncos, but ultimately the organization felt differently at the end of the day. Sayre, we're going to address that a little bit more coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that and we look ahead to today's action when the Broncos have more picks and into a look into next season because the Broncos acquired some more draft capital, what does that mean for them? Let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's your good friends over there at Built Bar. And Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market today. And if you love Built Bar initially, the jam-packed protein bar, well, you can now try the Built Bar granola bars that they've released with 3 exclusive new flavors over at Built.com. Plus, if you like the original Built Bar, they have 9 amazing original flavors, plus the occasional limited time flavor that you can get there at Built.com. And if you need a little bit of extra push to get yourself through your day, make sure you take a bite into Built Bar. 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. And I want you to get a box of Built Bar today by going to Built.com. And when you go to checkout, make sure you use promo code LOCK15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order today at Built.com. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of Lockdown Broncos, before we look ahead to today's NFL draft, the remaining selections here for this Broncos team, a look ahead into next year's draft capital. Real quick, once again, thank you so much, Broncos Country, for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day. We should be your daily Denver Broncos go-to for short, sweet, and objective content and coverage of all things Denver Broncos related. We appreciate you so much. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, and comment for the algorithm. Sayre, my friend, continuing on here today. The Broncos were supposed to have another pick in round number 3. They were supposed to have pick number 96, but Denver traded back with the Indianapolis Colts. And what they've received in return, a round 5, pick 179 for them a little bit later on in this year's NFL draft, and an Indianapolis Colts 3rd round pick next season. This is smart right here. I mean, yes, you could take a multitude of players in 96, but I think you got to think long game here. Why did the Denver Broncos do this, and what does this mean for their draft capital next year? Because initially coming into this draft, they were looking pretty low next year.
Yeah, I believe there are only 4 draft picks on next year's slate with all the trades that have been made, including the Russell Wilson deal, obviously, which depleted your top 2 picks in that class. So you make this trade with the Indianapolis Colts. I think you got a really good shot to recoup some assets next year. Now you could use those 2 third-round picks to move into next year's second round if you want to do that, or like we talked about on the episode yesterday, could the Broncos trade a player next offseason for those, to recoup those first or maybe second round picks? We'll see what happens there. And then there's also the option of, like, let's just say the Broncos defense balls out next year and Ejiro Evero gets hired by another team as head coach. That's going to give the Broncos third round picks in 2023 and 2024 because he's a minority head coaching candidate. So those types of things can absolutely happen, and they're uncontrollable at this point.
Yeah.
But those are things that you maybe factor into the equation of, like, this is a potential of happening. So I think there's lots of options for future capital on the table. George Paton, talking at his press conference after, day 2 of the draft, said, they might try to do that again on day 3 with their selections that they have. So the Broncos have picks 115 and 116 here in round 4 today. What are they going to do with those 2 selections? I think that made it very smart of them, Cody, to me, to trade 96, and you're going to get a better pick next year than 96 from the Indianapolis Colts, unless the Colts win the Super Bowl, which, let's be honest, unless you're a Colts fan, I don't see that happening next year, even with Matt Ryan coming to town. So at the very least, you're going to be getting a pick better than 96 in 2023. Plus you get a 5 in 2022. I think that's a no-brainer trade for George Paton. He still has 8 selections left to work with today, Cody. And we know, man, George Paton, who had the number 1 draft in 2021, he's going to be putting out some bangers with those 8 picks. We believe it.
I'm excited to see what the Broncos and George Paton decide to do here today, because coming into it, look, the Broncos roster, for the most part, what we have said is firmly intact. They have pretty much almost everybody you can imagine that will be starting in 2022 already on the roster, and the rest are just added value picks that could be starters next year or the year after, or developmental depth pieces. That is a goal for the Broncos. It is to get players onto second contracts. Now, here's the thing. Now the Broncos go from having 4 picks next year to having 5, which is great. We know George Paton, his sweet spot is 10. Well, yesterday he got the 10, and then bam, now you have 8 today. So the Broncos and George Paton kind of have this trend here. However, I would say that there is a little bit of a mixed feeling right now in Broncos country between fans, media, so on and so forth. And I certainly understand that. I think a lot of it's there. A lot of people are saying, why did the Broncos do this? Why did George Paton do this? Has George Paton given us any reason so far in his tenure as the GM to really question what he's doing? Like, there's always a plan. There's a lot of Broncos fans who are like, how come they didn't take Nakobe Dean? Well, Nakobe Dean's medicals came back very severe. Not just 1 injury, not just 2 injuries, multiple injuries that were red flagged by various NFL teams. And so all of a sudden, going back to the behind the Broncos thing, what is one thing that we saw in that and in the pre-draft press conference from George Paton and the Broncos, Sayre? It said, and he said, and Darren Muji said, we really invest a lot in the medicals. We do double checks, triple checks, quadruple checks on some of these prospects. Medicals are super important. Denver's not going to take that risk on a player that does that. And look, if Nakobe Dean goes on to have a very successful career with the Eagles, that is fantastic. But that doesn't mean that's a failure on behalf of George Paton and this Broncos football team. Concerns are concerns. And these guys are essentially banking their jobs on making sure that they're drafting the right picks. I think that George Paton, for the most part, these 2 picks that he's made so far in day number 2 yesterday, Sayre, I like the picks. I can't disagree with any of them. I think Denver's going to be in a good direction here, especially with the offense and the roster and the defense that these guys already have. I just get it. Fans get frustrated because coming up in the draft process, we all do our mock drafts, right? We have certain players that are higher up on our board, players that maybe we prefer. The organization has more information on all these prospects than any of us ever will. And I think that's one thing. They have all the information, so they're making the best decisions for the organization based on the information that they have. And so maybe because you wanted a guy or I wanted a certain guy and they didn't take him, doesn't mean that they don't know what they're doing. It just means that they have a different plan, and then maybe they had other players higher up on the board, kind of like the Justin Fields thing from last year. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, Justin Fields should have been number 1 player on the board. Patrick Surtain was the number 1 player on the board alongside Trey Lance. So trust in George Paton. I mean, he has not given Broncos country, in my opinion, Sayre, any reason to doubt just yet. How do you feel about this? Do you feel the same? Do you feel indifferent about it?
Cody, I'm always positive. I'm always on the positive side, and that doesn't mean that,
Nothing
like
wrong
you
with that at
mentioned
all.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned earlier, like we bring objective coverage on this show. And yeah, I wear the jersey, I wear the hat. I love to represent the team. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to call out stuff that I dislike or that I don't agree with. And I think that absolutely Broncos fans, you all have a right to like certain players. But at the same time, George Paton has earned his way into the old Jack Burns circle of trust. For anybody who's a big fan of the movie Meet the Parents, he's in the circle of trust. Why? He won the award for the best draft literally last year. He just traded for Russell Wilson. He went out and signed Randy Gregory and DJ Jones in free agency. He re-signed Justin Simmons last year. He got extensions for Sutton and Patrick. I mean, he's done everything that Broncos fans could have possibly. Has he literally done everything, Cody, on the list? He's done everything.
Yes.
Broncos fans wanted Justin Simmons re-signed. He did it. They wanted Sutton and Patrick back. He did it. They wanted a quarterback. He got him. So who freaking cares, who freaking cares if he didn't pick Leo Chenal at pick number 75 and instead chose Greg Dulcich, the tight end that he likes? By the way, shout out to George Paton for getting his first UCLA Bruin, his alma mater. He finally drafted somebody from his alma mater. But man, I'm with you on this, Cody. I cannot stand the greediness. I mean, it's just let's just call it what it is, people. And we can all be. You have a right to be greedy. Like you can want Nakobe Dean, but context matters in those types of situations. The Eagles had 2 first-round picks. They spent one of them on AJ Brown. They had second-round picks. The Broncos didn't have all the same selections the Eagles did, so they maybe didn't have the same luxury to say, hey, with a 3rd-round pick, screw it. Let's just throw a dart at the board and see if Nakobe Dean can work out. The Broncos don't have that luxury this year. They needed to prioritize getting 2023 capital. They needed to prioritize a pass-catching tight end. They needed to prioritize a pass rusher. I get where people are coming from, but that whole discussion is so deep and it's so far-reaching. Like, first of all, the linebacker position in the NFL today is antiquated, and the Broncos are going to be playing in the nickel and the dime way too often to care about where Leo Chenal is playing in 2022. He's playing for the Kansas City Chiefs now, so you better not like him too much. But I think that obviously this is a concern, like from just a fan base perspective, like the toxicity has to stop with all that George Paton has done. Have some perspective for what your general manager has gone out and done and completely turned the culture of this team on its head from a year ago.
This Broncos team is so much better right now, even on paper, than it has been, I think you can say, in the last combined 6 to 7 years in totality. Denver's in a good direction right now. They're heading in the right spot here. And like you said, too, I mean, the Broncos have options. It's the perfect balance, Sayre, of making sure, like, okay, hey, how can we get more capital for next year's NFL draft without maybe having to get rid of some of our really good players? How can we make some maneuvers to put ourselves in a decent position, have flexibility going into next season, while also still preserving and getting quality players with some of the picks that we do have in this year's NFL draft? That would be my level of thinking. Like if I were George Paton, that's how I would kind of approach it. And maybe his philosophy is a little bit different, but as you said, George Paton has literally given everything that Broncos fans have really wanted from a roster perspective. And look, the NFL draft, it's such a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen. Teams are always trading up, trading back. Denver is playing it by ear, and they're seeing how it's going. And they're also not putting themselves in a position to reach on a player. So I like these 2 selections. Sayre, I know you do. I know Broncos country, a good portion of them like it. Some are mixed, and that's perfectly okay. What really matters at the end of the day, when we see these players on the field, how do they perform? That's how they will be measured as well in the standard. But how will the Denver Broncos do in today's round number 4 through 7? Day 3 of the NFL draft continues. We get complete coverage of everything that the Broncos do here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. But with that said, folks, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Sit down, enjoy the NFL draft. Let's see what Denver does. And you can expect Sayre Bedinger and myself to be back with more Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage as we look to finalize Denver Broncos roster going into 2022's training camp from the NFL draft and undrafted rookie free agents. With that said, we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.